Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Friday, March 14th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Texas game is in 169 days. The game against Michigan in 260 days. If you're planning your next event, make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at gratefulgriddleoh.com. Talking Ohio State basketball today. It's a topic that has gotten people a little fired up this week, which is a little bit abnormal for Ohio State fans and on the Ohio State fan base. Joined by Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony, this was an Ohio State basketball season that looked like, oh, this is going to be a better season than maybe you expected. And then everything just kind of went directly to heck right at the end of the year.
We've seen this show before, it seems, where you see a lot of the possibilities when they're playing well and they can beat just about anybody at any given time, but then also lose to anybody at any given time. And that's exactly the kind of inconsistency that can undo you at any point in the season, and especially down the stretch when it kind of just builds and builds. And so this is a bad closeout basically for the Buckeyes when they kept needing to just, if you win a couple of games, you're in. Like, you're on the bubble right now. Just assure yourself get some insurance and win a game here against teams that you should be able to beat, and they just refuse to do it.
Yeah, probably about 1 week ago, you and I were doing a show, and it was essentially, okay, they won their first two games of the sort of home stretch. They beat Nebraska and then USC, I think, and then all they had to do was either beat Indiana or win their first game of the Big Ten tournament. Both they would have been in comfortably. You would do one, you're probably in. You win two games of the Big Ten tournament, you're probably in. I mean, there were lots of ways they could have gotten in. It is not Selection Sunday now; they're not officially out, but I don't think they're probably going to be on the happy side of the bubble this year. And there has been a lot of very loud, very angry, this should never happen to Ohio State. Why is Ohio State basketball like this? And, I have theories and I have stuff that I've shared on our message board that has gotten people very annoyed with me, but that's fine. We're going to be talking about some of that a little bit later. But I think let's start the conversation with this. What is a reasonable expectation for Ohio State? What is sort of the baseline for, okay, this is at least a reasonably successful season, or let's maybe even say span of 5 seasons for Ohio State men's basketball?
Well, I'm thinking about that, and I tweeted, tweeting about this, and we're all tweeting about it. And, I said something to the effect of, yeah, they should make the tournament every year. And then I went back, I'm like, should they? Have they? Because, Tom, the NCAA tournament has been 64 or 68 teams for 40 years now. This will be the 40th year of it. Ohio State has made the tournament 22 times in those 40 years, assuming that they're not going to make it this year. So about half the time they make the tournament. Thad Matta made it 9 times in his 13 years, and Chris Holtmann made it 4 in his 6 years. And I think, one of those years was the COVID year, so that wasn't an option. But like, those two guys have kind of ruined the curve here, because even O'Brien, Randy Ayers, Gary Williams, Eldon Miller, like, they made it a little under half the time all told. So, like, basically, what is an acceptable season at Ohio State? This one. Like, based on average, it's this one. And which is, where it's not great. I think obviously you'd rather have Sweet 16, no postseason next year, Sweet 16, no postseason the next year. That's how you'd rather do your, like, 50%. But this is not an unusual season for Ohio State, as all of the Ohio State fans listening know. What were unusual seasons was what Thad Matta was doing, and we can get into why that was happening if you want, because I think when we talk about that, there's some data there that was happening for Thad Matta that has not happened for anybody else.
Yeah, and the Thad Matta era is the thing that everyone sort of points to and goes, well, why can't they just do that all the time? And it's like, well, because that's not the historical norm. That's not, you look at the Ohio State list of tournament appearances, and it looks like the solar cycles where, the sun is like high solar levels where you have a bunch of solar storms and stuff, and then low levels of solar activity or the La Nina and El Nino ocean cycles, like whatever. There's like these natural cycles in the universe. That's what like Ohio State basketball is, where it's like, yeah, they made the NCAA tournament and they made the Sweet 16 in 1991 and 1992, and then they went into a lull for 7 years, and then they made it once, and then they went into a lull for 8 years, and then they made it 5 times in 7 years, and now they've been in an 8-year lull. And at some point, are they going to come back? Yeah, probably. But looking at Sweet 16s in 2007, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, and nothing since, and only one in the 15 years, but before that, like that's the outlier. That is not that is the exception. That is not the rule. And you've posted about this a bunch on our board before, but there's lots of reasons why the Thad Matta era is, why don't they just do this all the time? Like, well, there are actual answers to that question.
Yeah, and I tweeted about this as well, where so Thad Matta got to Ohio State 2004, 2005. That was his first year. In the 2006 through 2008 recruiting cycles nationally, there were 11 top 50 kids in Ohio in that 3-year span. 6 of them signed with Ohio State. So in that 3-year span, there were 11 top 50 kids. From 2009 to 2017, the rest of Thad Matta's recruiting, there were 7 top 50 kids in Ohio, only 2 of whom signed with Ohio State. You started getting into some of the prep school, basketball school type things where the basketball academies, if you will, start to they're that guy's an Ohio kid, but not really. But then you also have AAU, which basically eliminates in-state recruiting. Ohio State has never been great. They've never been at their peak, or they've never been really, really good without impactful Ohio players. And they've got some this year, but they don't have enough around it. But you can go back all the time, where you go back to Fred Taylor when he's got Jerry Lucas and Havlicek and Bobby Knight. Like, these are all Ohio kids. You go back to Gary Williams, where he's got Jay Burson. Go back to Randy Ayers, where he's got Jim Jackson and Perry Carter and Trig Lee and Mark Baker. Always Ohio guys. Even Jim O'Brien with Michael Redd. And then you get into the fortune of Thad Matta, where you have the Ohio guys. We can get into some of these, but then also two kids from Indianapolis and Greg Oden and Mike Conley. And then Ohio State has also done really well in Illinois. So it's like these border-ish type states, but mainly if you don't have anything in Ohio, if the Ohio talent is down, Ohio State's talent is going to be down. And that's just the way it's always been. It will always be. So then you've got to do something about it. And Tom, let me just read you. The Ohio State's last great team was the 2010-2011 team, where Jared Sullinger was a freshman and Aaron Kraft was a freshman, and they were like 31-3, and they lost in the Sweet 16 on a buzzer beater to Kentucky. But Jared Sullinger, Ohio, William Buford from Toledo, John Diebler from Upper Sandusky, David Leidy from Cleveland, Deshaun Thomas from way out west in Fort Wayne, Aaron Kraft from Findlay, Dallas Lauderdale from Solon, Jordan Seibert from Cincinnati. Like, this was all essentially Ohio. And once you get away from that, and not just get away from it, but once the talent gets away from Ohio and there's no fence because there's no loyalty, it's all AAU. There is no Old State U. Like, college football and college basketball are completely different. Although college football is starting to, look a little bit more like it. If you don't have Ohio recruiting, then you're not going to have a great system, a great program at Ohio State. Now, that's just history. Now, things are changing, so Ohio State could change with it. But even then, Tom, goes back to your question, like, well, what is acceptable? Well, forever, this has been acceptable because this is what people have become used to. And the fact that it keeps happening means that it's acceptable.
Right. This is maybe not the standard that everyone would like it to be, but this is kind of the standard where this a year like this, even 2 years like this, doesn't usually get you fired. So we'll see what next year looks like. And with the portal, you can obviously change things quite a bit. But I've seen lots of comments about, well, I don't understand why Ohio State doesn't also pay a like really elite coach and, just have to. I went through, this is a couple weeks ago now, but I went through and like looked at, okay, the top 10 coaches in terms of football salaries, and how many of those schools also have a top 10 coach in terms of basketball salary. And I think the only one that was even close to it was Alabama. And they're not paying Kalen DeBoer nearly what they got, what they were paying Nick Saban. And I will point you to the fact that Alabama was in the ReliaQuest Bowl this year and not in the college football playoff. So, I think the real question here is, you're mad now, and that's fine. You're allowed to be mad now. That's fine. A month and a half from now, are you still going to be mad, or are you going to be thinking about football? Because as someone who has been in the Ohio State content business for years and years and years, allow me to assure you, you're mad now. 6 weeks from now, you won't be able to name 5 players on the Ohio State basketball team because you're going to be thinking about who the third string strong safety is. Like, that's, I don't know what to tell you. Like, this is how it is. There is a small subset of the Ohio State fan base that cares more about basketball than football. And that's great. And those people, there are people who care more about hockey or more about baseball or whatever. Like, cool, great. It is a small subset of the Ohio State fan base. And if, I think, everyone sort of needs to understand the modern realities of college athletics, which is there's only so much money. Ohio State ran a deficit last year in their athletic department. There's only so much money under the House settlement, which is still kind of getting sorted out a little bit, but is coming. There's going to be money going to players. Now there's less money going out. How much money are you willing to divert from the football program? You as an Ohio State fan, if you were in charge, how much money are you going to divert from the football program to pay for the basketball program? You really want a small forward on the basketball team. You want a center on the basketball team next year. Okay, where on the football team are you taking less money? Are you going to take a player away from the football team to put that center on the basketball team? And next November or January, are you going to think, thank goodness there's a center on the basketball team who I like, and, hey, they don't have, sure, the right tackle spot. Yeah, it'll probably cost us in the college football playoff. But listen, we have a center on the basketball team. Allow me to assure you, I see the numbers on how much people read, watch about Ohio State basketball compared to Ohio State football. You don't care as much. You're mad now. You don't care as much. Like, maybe you will in a month, maybe, but probably not. Go on our board in 6 weeks and look at how many football threads there are during the football offseason as compared to how many basketball threads there are during the basketball offseason. There's only so much money. Does that mean it's impossible to win? No. But again, if you look at, we put together, I had someone on our board ask about, why can't they just do what everyone else does? Like, it's crazy that there's not, that they're not any better at basketball in an athletic department that's this big. And I went through and looked at the other 10 top biggest athletic departments by budget, which is sort of a decent proxy for, like, this is what a big athletic department is. Tell me what these 10 schools all have in common. Ohio State, Texas, Alabama, Michigan, Georgia, LSU, Texas A&M, Florida, Penn State, Oklahoma. I would submit that the answer is all of them, they're better at football than they are at basketball broadly. And of those 10 schools going back to 2015, there were a total of 5 conference titles for those 2 in basketball for those 10 programs, 43 NCAA tournament appearances, 15 Sweet 16s, 6 Elite Eights, 3 Final Fours for 10 schools over 10 seasons. So you're averaging 0.3 Final Fours for those 10 programs. Ohio State has not made a Sweet 16 in those 10 years. That's absolutely true. Several others have only made 0 or 1 Sweet 16s. This is kind of what it is when you are a big football program.
Well, I had somebody of us on the board or the Twitter say, well, I would like to at least be what Iowa is on basketball. And it's like, Iowa has made the tournament one more time than Ohio State and like since Chris Holtman came to town. So you are like, this is, but I do think Ohio State should be better in basketball. I'd say there's no reason they shouldn't be, but for whatever reason, they continue to this is what they are. And it's because it's allowed and it's acceptable. There's nobody to make it like, I'm not standing for this. There's no, money guy that is like, this is my program. I'm this is not going to happen under my watch. There's no Uncle Phil here for Ohio State basketball, and it's more of a like a just I'll do what I can type of thing. And the other thing is, Tom, is something I think I said on the message board or on Twitter, like make the right purchases because you didn't. Like this was not like I understand the timing was pretty bad for all of this. Like Ross Bjork making the hire in between jobs and like you've got to get it done type of thing. Putting together a roster, the Bradshaw and the Stewart thing, like those programs that lost them were just fine losing them. Like you paid a bunch for them. You paid for Michi Johnson, and that he left because a freshman was beating him out, and rightfully so. But like you got to make better decisions with the money that you have. Like they were willing to do some spending, but you got to be smarter with the money. And if you are, then you can do some things because we always talk about just the transient nature of college sports, college basketball especially. Like you can be a new team the next year and make a run, but that doesn't mean you're going to do it the year after that. I think feel bad for Bruce Thornton because to be able to keep a guy for 3 years, and we'll see if they can keep him for 4, a starting point guard for 3 or 4 years, and this is what you've done with it, is a complete waste.
Yeah, he's had a really, really good career, and he's going to go down as like this great underappreciated player because a lot of times the supporting cast around him was just not good enough. And think about how much the supporting cast around him has changed over the years. I was trying to think back, like 2 years back, naming how many Ohio State basketball players can I name? Because boy, there are a lot of names that have come and gone over those couple of years. Bruce Thornton is probably going to play his career with something like 30 different players, maybe more than that. I mean, it's crazy how fast the roster is turning over there. But I think your point there in terms of you're not necessarily that far off in terms of you missed the tournament this year by probably 1 to 2 wins. You missed the tournament last year by probably like 2 wins. If they had beaten Illinois in the tournament last year, they might have been a little bit more on the bubble. And then they went on a nice run in the NIT. It's not like it's that far away. It's not like this is a hopeless, this is not Chicago State or DePaul or, one of those teams that's just kind of perpetually hopeless. It's a team that's kind of around the NCAA tournament. And they've just been a little bit short the last couple of years. And, I think you have to, this all kind of goes back to me, Tony, to sort of understanding the 2 questions that we've talked about. What's a reasonable expectation? And what are you willing to give up? Because unless you have, like Bill Davis in the baseball program, Bill Davis was a longtime donor in the baseball program, gave a ton of money. The baseball stadium's named after him. He was a baseball guy. I don't know that you have a mega donor who's like, I only care about basketball. And, I'm not going to give money to football. I'm just going to give it to basketball. And it's either I'm going to give it to basketball or I'm not going to give it to anything. Because otherwise it all goes kind of in the same pot. And the way the Ohio State Athletic Department works is if the football team has a couple bad seasons in a row and ticket sales fall and merchandise sales fall, all that kind of stuff, that's going to be a bad time for Ohio State in terms of the balance sheet. If there's a couple bad seasons in terms of basketball, how did football do? Spring football is right around the corner. That's kind of the way that the athletic department kind of runs, just based on the balance sheet. And I think you have to kind of look at what is reasonable expectation in terms of basketball historically, and what's a reason, and what are you willing to sacrifice to exceed that historical norm? And those are questions that I think are, like I said, everyone's mad right now. A month from now, ask yourself those 2 questions and see what you think.
Yeah, and even when things are going well, the interest still wanes. You're still 13, 14,000 people in the arena, and it's very, very rare that there is actually a sellout, even when things are going well at the shot. So if you're mad now, that's fine. But when you're happy, you could, and again, I say you could support the team more. Like I'm trying, I don't want to make the basketball fans angry because there are some legit Ohio State basketball fans who might be listening to this or watching this and being like, I'm totally being ignored. We understand that, but it's everybody else that is they're the ones doing the ignoring. And if Ohio State fans were as into basketball as they were into football, the world would be a happier place, but they're not. And so this is, what is acceptable? You're looking at it because I don't think Jake Diebler is getting fired this year. And frankly, the way that he was hired, I don't even know that you know enough about him to fire him, but did you know enough about him to hire him?
Yeah, he certainly, I would say, deserves another year, and you can't fire someone after 1 year. The only time other than scandal that I've thought like that's an acceptable time to fire someone after 1 year was Ellis Johnson, who took what was like I think a 10-2 Southern Miss team and went 0-12 in his first year. It was like, yeah, that dude needs to get canned and quick. Otherwise, you got to give people 2 years, at least 2 years, and we'll see 2-3 years for Jake Diebler. The buyout is very reasonable. This is not something that's going to, you're not chained to him forever, but he certainly deserves another year to see if you have some better personnel decisions, better player development decisions. You don't have some of the off-court nonsense that they had this year. I mean, there's a lot of that stuff that all kind of goes into that.
Yeah, and I'm going to say, in terms of bringing in a coach, let's remember, Ohio State in its history, the biggest places that it can go and get somebody's coach from is Boston College. They did it with Gary Williams, and they did it with Jim O'Brien. You're not going to go and get the top guy or any of the top 10 guys. You're going to have to go to a lower level, like Thad Matta being at Xavier for a year when was like the best. That was just so much happenstance and just really good timing with the whole Thad Matta era. The fact that he was right there and you're looking for a coach, and that was a late hire as well. But like, you're not just going to go and get the guy that everybody wants because it's never happened.
Right. And so, again, I'm sure I can already tell the people who have posted comments before they finish watching the whole thing that we're just making excuses. It's like, I don't know what to tell you. This is sort of we're explaining to you the reality of the situation, and you may not like it, but you want to know why this is happening. This is a lot of the why behind what's happening. We've talked about a lot of different stuff, and there's a lot of different factors there, but there's also, unless you're going to just throw a big pot of money at it, and that Kentucky basketball has tried that for years, and it's been a while since they've been in a confetti adjacent situation. So, even that is not a guarantee, but there is always next year. We'll see what the roster looks like. I'm guessing there will be plenty of turnover there. We'll be talking about that, but of course we'll also be talking quite a bit about football because this is Ohio State, and that's kind of what we do at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We'll talk about whatever you want to, but again, you guys tend to want to talk about football, so we end up talking about a whole lot about football there at BuckeyeHuddle.com, as well as everywhere else on these Ohio State internets. So we'll be there at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We'll be at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. And great news, spring football is starting next week. Monday, we'll have our first spring practice. We'll have a couple more football shows before we get there, but we'll have plenty of coverage there all spring long at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We hope to see you there. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.